Hello everyone and welcome back for some more Drag Race gossip, secrets and drama. So I'm back for another Have Your Say video where you at home get to vote on whether you agree with the outcome of this week's episode. And this video is for Season 17 Episode 4. So today we're going to be recapping this week's episode, going through the results of the Have Your Say poll, and I'll be talking about a little bit of drama to do with Joella addressing the backlash against her exit line. And someone online potentially exposed a Drag Race editing mistake, and it looks like Drag Race are trying to cover it up. All that and more coming up in today's video, so let's get started. Okay, so let's start by recapping this week's episode. So the queens come back into the workroom and it was after Lucky Stars' elimination, which was the first elimination of the season. And lots of girls are very sad for Lucky. But one of the things I just found unintentionally funny was that so many queens were crying and then they just cut to Joella and she was like, why is everyone crying? And I just thought it was so funny but kind of unintentionally. And this clip of Joella saying that made the rounds on social media and kind of became a bit of a meme. The queens then sit down and there seems to be a little bit of tension, especially with Arietti, because she clearly feels a certain type of way about not winning last week. So the queens come into the workroom the next day and we find out the maxi challenge is that the queens have to perform tracks which are inspired by previous Untucked episodes, and it's called Be I'm a Drag Queen. And there's going to be two different groups, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And to assign the groups, the queens have to reach into Bruno's big pink box and pull it out at random. And these include such untucked moments as, for example, Aja and Valentina, you're perfect, you're beautiful, you look like Linda Evangelista. We also have things like Candy and Tamisha in Untucked, which was very legendary. And it wasn't just untucked moments specifically, but a lot of them did come from Untucked. Personally, I really loved the idea for this challenge. It very much reminded me of Season 5 where they did this, where they lip-synced to previous Untucked episodes. This is obviously a bit different because they're not just lip-syncing to the track from Untucked, they are making a song out of it. But I loved this idea. I thought it was a really cool idea. It's really interesting that Drag Race has now got to a point where it's so big and there's so much content that's really iconic that Drag Race is referencing itself in these sorts of challenges. They don't even need to pull from anywhere outside of Drag Race. And I think this is also something that's really cool for fans of the show like me and you at home, because I'm sure a lot of us, we know a lot of these Untucked moments. So it's almost like a greatest hits thing, which I guess is why they call it Be I'm a Drag Queen, which is a little bit like the Now That's What I Call Music CDs that they used to have back in the day. We then see the queens actually performing it and we get told that they recorded the tracks off camera that they didn't show. And it's the usual thing of, obviously, some people are shown to be struggling and you're never quite sure in these moments whether that's actually a true reflection of what really happened or whether Drag Race is trying to sort of set someone up for a win or a fail, or maybe they're just trying to throw in a red herring to make you think that someone's going to be in the bottom. So I always take these moments with a grain of salt, but it's very interesting to see how the queens actually do it. And I'm very excited to see the full performances because these look really cool. Okay, so now let's move on to the runway for this week because that happened before they did the final performances. And the category this week was Quilted for Your Pleasure. As usual, I won't give my opinions on each outfit 'cause it's just not my thing, but what I will do at the end is say which outfit was my favourite. Okay, so I'll go in order in which they appeared, and first up we had Lydia B. Collins. She said she's not the crazy cat lady, she's the couch that the crazy cat lady lets her cats pee on. After that, we had Lana Duray. She said she decided to represent this theme by being as colourful as possible because when she thinks of quilts, she thinks of colour. After that, we had Joella. She said she can only half see where she's going because she's a gigantic quilt blanket, and then bam, and she has RuPaul on the back. Then we had Arietti. She said she's serving black and white and red quilted eleganza, and it has structure, latex, and drapery. After that, we had Jules Sparkles. She said she feels like a supervillain in this super villainous look, and it's a super avant-garde sleeve moment. After that, we had Hormona Lisa. She said this garment is quilted to the nines just like your grandma would do, and she's paying homage to Dolly Parton's Coat of Many Colours. Up next, we had Crystal Envy. She said her coat is inspired by Gigi Hadid's Met Gala Versace dress, and she's also giving you Larry the Lobster arms. After that, we had Susie Toot. She said she's wearing a Lord of the Rings fantasy-inspired golden headdress, a quilted patchwork gown in burgundy and maroon. Then after that, we had Sam Starr. She said she's giving you a fabulous headpiece that's a pillow as she sleeps on the runway, and is a sleeping bag-inspired gown. After that, we had Acacia Forgot. She said this dress is made out of quilts by her mother, and she accessorized it with her grandmother's trunk, and then the wig is adorned by doilies made by her great-grandmother. After that, we had Anya Nerve. She said she has African quilts that are pieced together square by square. Her afro is tied up with a beautiful quilted head wrap, and she feels black and beautiful. Next up, we had Lexi Love. She said she feels like the most sickening guard outside of the Fashion Institute, and the rhinestone detail is immaculate. Also, interesting fun fact for this runway, this was actually made by Utica from season 13. And then finally we had Corey King. She said that her drag family created this outfit, and she's wearing a quilted hat, a quilted top, and a quilted long train. Overall, I loved this runway. I think everyone did a pretty good job. Obviously, there were some that were better than others, which we'll discuss later, but overall, it was a fantastic runway. I think my favourite overall would probably be Crystal's, just because it looked so obviously quilt. I think it straight away screamed the category, but not only that, it was also just really beautiful. The draping and everything was so cool. I liked the reveal that underneath it was kind of a bit campy, but still really beautiful, and it fit the theme really well. The other person's outfit I did love as well was Anya's, because it was just so beautiful. She sold it so well on the runway. Okay, so let's move on to the actual songs and performances. And they obviously did it in groups, so we start off with Volume 1. And I'll go through each queen in order in which they performed. So first up we had Lana and Lydia doing No Class, No Manners, which was Morgan McMichaels and Mystique Summers. Overall, I thought they performed very well. I think they did a decent job. It wasn't necessarily the most memorable. The most funny bit to me was the bits where they had their shoes on each other's necks and they were dead. I thought that was quite funny. And when they were hitting each other with the instruments. But to me, the bit that actually stole the show was Crystal doing the tumbleweed in the background. I don't think Crystal necessarily got enough credit for the fact that that must have been really hard to do, but it was really focus and attention stealing, and I thought that Crystal actually almost kind of stole the show just in this scene with that. But I still think that Lydia and Lana did a good job. After that, we had Joella doing We Write the Stories by Mariah Paris Balenciaga. I will say, I thought this one was one of the harder ones to do overall, just because it wasn't necessarily a funny moment. It was more of a heartfelt, powerful moment. So I do think it was maybe slightly different to some of the other scenes that we had. Overall, though, I don't think this was the strongest scene. This was probably one of my least favourite. I just think that Joella could have really taken it a lot further. She seemed a little bit low energy, which I was kind of surprised about, given that it was sort of a gospel number, and usually they're just so energetic and full of life, and I think she kind of felt a bit lacking, whereas the other queens who were in the yellow robes in the background were actually giving more energy than Joella was. I will say, I thought Joella's voice sounded quite good, though, in the song itself. And I think she was trying, because that bit where she rolled down the stairs was quite funny. But just overall, the lack of energy just kind of took away from the performance for me. Then we had Ariete and Jules doing back rolls, which was Alyssa Edwards and Jade Jolie. I really liked this one. It's also just an iconic moment. I mean, who doesn't know the back rolls moment with Alyssa Edwards? I will agree with the judges and say, though, that I think Jules did steal the show slightly from Ariete. I think what Jules did really well was the facial expressions, because even when she wasn't saying anything, your eye was just naturally drawn to her because she was just doing all of these crazy faces. So I do think she stole the scene a little bit, but I thought Ariete also did a good job, and overall it was a very, very good scene. Also, what I quite enjoyed was the bit where they were on the sofa and Lana was there. And I think, this is just my guess, but I think because in the original Untucked moment, Coco Montrese was there with Alyssa and Jade. And obviously Coco is known for being called Orange. And I think that's why Lana was holding an orange thing in front of her face. And she was supposed to be Coco, I assume. I'm just guessing that's the case, but I just thought that was kind of a funny, intriguing little tidbit. They didn't necessarily explain, but that's what I got from it. Let me know in the comments if you also thought that. After that, we had Hormona doing I Nominate Myself by Chanel. This was one of the ones I was most intrigued to actually watch because when they were doing the actual filming, they made it look like Hormona was not taking direction and maybe she wasn't going to do that well. But I actually thought she did really well. She had enough beats to keep it funny. I thought she was quite smart that she sort of made it very much about her and focused on her only. And she had enough funny moments like the bit where she was tweezing the nose hairs and things like that and doing the funny mouth movements, which was kind of very detoxy. It was enough things to make it funny. And then finally, we had Crystal doing Unprofessional by Latrice Royale. I thought this was such a good scene, and I thought Crystal did such a good job directing people, telling them what to do. Also, is it just me, but when I saw Crystal in this black outfit with the glasses, it was really giving me Charlie's Angels vibes when Lucy Liu was wearing that outfit in the office scene, and she had that cane. I don't know why, but that's all I could see when I was looking at this. But this was probably one of my favourites in this group because it was just so funny. She hit every beat, she knew exactly what she wanted to do, she served face, she gave the attitude, so I do think Crystal did a great job. Okay, so moving on to volume 2, and the first up was Susie Toot doing You're Perfect by Aja. I thought Susie did such a good job. She really committed to everything that she did, like not only looking in the mirror and emoting, but I thought she did such a great job like eating the flowers and spitting it out and kicking things around. She really was giving that kind of rock star vibe. And so overall, I thought Susie killed this. She did such a good job. This was definitely one of my favourites. Next, we had Sam Star and Acacia Forgot doing Star Quality by Candy Muse and Tamisha Iman. I thought this one was okay. I can see why they did the kind of dancing thing, but I just thought it was a slightly odd choice. I suppose it was trying to make it a little bit different, but it was just a little bit confusing. The only bit that I thought was funny was the bit right at the end when she let Acacia fall down. Other than that, it was okay, but it wasn't my favourite. Then we had On Your Nerve doing Put Your Lighters Up by Laganja Estranja. This was my favourite out of all of them from either group because Anya just is so captivating to watch. The facial movements that she does, her voice sounded incredible. I was blown away by how good her voice sounds. She could genuinely be a recording artist with that voice. It was so good. She was very smart that she just had it very simple, focused on her, and so no one was being distracted by other queens in the background. So this was very smart, and it was also just a fabulous, funny performance. Then we had Lexi Love doing This Is Your Moment by Jasmine Kennedy. I really liked this. I think Lexi's just so likeable and fun. She was actually kind of giving me very Alyssa Edwards vibe with the big hair and the facial expressions rather than necessarily Jasmine. It wasn't necessarily the best of all of them, but it certainly was a very good performance. And I thought the bit at the end when she had the hair falling off was really funny. And then finally we had Corey King doing Glamazon B by Kennedy Davenport. This one just unfortunately confused me. I think I can see where Corey was trying to go with it because this is such an iconic moment. Everyone knows the Kennedy Davenport speech off by heart, talking about being crystallized, walking down the runway and being gutted and all of that kind of stuff. It's just such an iconic moment. I can see what Corey was trying to go for. I just think that, as the judges said, when she did the outfit reveal, it wasn't enough of a reveal that I kind of didn't really even notice it at first. And I just don't think it really made that much sense. Most of the humour came at the end when she was falling over and slipping on the eggs, but that kind of came a bit too late, and for most of it she wasn't really doing anything. So unfortunately I think this one was just a little bit confused. This was probably my least favourite. So we find out that the winner for this week is On Your Nerve. And we find out that the bottom two are Corey King and Joella. They lip-sync to the song Buttons by the Pussycat Dolls featuring Snoop Dogg, and Corey King is announced as the winner, which means that unfortunately Joella is told to sashay away. Okay, so let's move on to the result of the Have Your Say poll. So question 1 was, if it had been judged in teams, which team would have won? And this was pretty split, 50-50 almost, but team 1 got 53.4% and then team 2 got 46.6%. I guess I can sort of see that maybe team 1 worked together better as a team, although I do think that Anya was probably the best overall performance and she was in group 2. I do think that group 1 maybe had a little bit more cohesion, so I can see why people voted for it. Question 2 was who had the best song performance overall? And we had 47.3% for On Your Nerve, 25.7% for Susie Toot, and 18.7% for Crystal Envy. And I do 100% agree with Anya being first. She was just so interesting, so captivating. Her voice sounded amazing. It was such an iconic moment from Laganja, and I just think that Anya really sold it. So I was very, very impressed by this. In terms of between Susie and Crystal, they both did a great job. I think perhaps Susie, I can imagine she got slightly more votes just because it was her on her own doing it, whereas Crystal's was very much more of a group thing because she had quite a few queens in her little bit. So I think maybe that is slightly why she got less votes, because it wasn't just focused on her. Question 3 was who had the best runway outfit? And we had Crystal Envy with 49.4%, Lexi Love with 17.8%, and then Sam Star with 10%. I do agree, Crystal's was such a fabulous outfit. As I said earlier, that was my favourite outfit just because it was just so obvious that it was quilted. It was very obvious what it was and it fit the theme, but also it was just a fabulous outfit in general. Question 4 was, do you agree with the tops? And this was a very strong result with 89.4% for yes and 10.6% for no. So moving on to question 5, which is related, which was, if you selected no above, as in you did not agree with the tops, who do you think should be in the top instead? So obviously most people voted NA, so we can kind of ignore that. But the person who got the most votes other than that was Jules Sparkles with 4%. As I said, I do think Jules did a really good job. She was serving face, she was very funny. I do think she was probably the better of the two between her and Ariete, so I can see why she would have been high in this. Then question 6 was, did you agree with the bottoms? And again, it was a pretty strong result, not quite as strong as last time, but it was 78.5% for yes and 21.5% for no. And then moving on to question 7, which was related, which was, if you selected no above, as in you did not agree with the bottoms, who do you think should have been in the bottom instead? And we had 77.3% for NA, so just obviously ignore that one. But the person who got the most votes was Acacia Forgot with 9.7%. I think I can see why Acacia got this many votes, because I think, if you excuse the pun, she was a little bit forgettable, because she was fun, but I don't think she stood out as much as Sam. I think Sam stood out more than she did, but I don't think that either one of them did necessarily the best job. So I can see why she got votes, but I agree that she shouldn't have been in the actual bottom two because I do think Joella and Lexi did worse. Question 8 was, who won the lip sync in your opinion? And this was a very strong result. Corey King got 97.7% and Joella only got 2.3%. And I definitely agree. I don't think it was necessarily the best lip sync overall, to be honest, but Joella did not know the words to quite a lot of the song. The bit where she turned around and just showed the RuPaul thing and didn't even move the mouth or anything like that, I was just a little bit confused. Maybe it was because she didn't know the words. So overall, it wasn't the best lip sync, but Corey did definitely win. Then for question 9 and 10, I slightly switched it up from previously, and it was question 9, who do you think will win the season? And we had Lexi Love with 55.4, Susie Toot with 15.5, and Anya Nerve with 13.5. And then if we compare that to question 10, which is, who do you want to win the season? And I think this is quite interesting because the results have changed somewhat in this in terms of the percentages. So Lexi Love still comes out on top with 38.2%. Then it's Susie Toot with 23.1%. And then Anya Nerve with 10.4%. So although the top 3 queens are still Lexi, Susie and Anya, I think it's interesting to see the different amounts that they're getting in these two questions. But I definitely agree. I think Lexi, for me, is at the moment the front runner. She's really good in what she does. She's very funny, but she's also really likable and she's been good in everything. And I can see why Susie and Anya are also getting high votes because Susie's been very consistent throughout and very fun. And I think Anya has really kind of shot up this last couple of weeks and she's showing that she's got so much stage presence and likability. So I can see why I think those 3 are going to go far in the competition. But let me know in the comments what you think. Okay, so let's move on to the comments for this week. So let's start with my Patreon comments, and my Patreon member Emmy said, I don't think anyone did super horrible this week. It's such a strong cast, I really don't want to see a single girl go. And I do agree with this, it is a very strong cast. I don't think anyone did that badly, as I said earlier. Even Joella and Corey didn't necessarily do that badly compared to some of the challenges we've seen in the past on Drag Race, so I think it's just a very high caliber of drag this season. My Patreon member Riot said, Anya has stolen my heart along with the trim. Now this one did make me laugh because of the bit about the trim, which is obviously a reference to last week when Anya apparently stole that trim from Jules. But I do agree with this statement overall. Anya is just so funny and likeable. And the last few episodes, Anya has been giving such good television. She's so fun, so intriguing, so captivating. So yeah, definitely Anya has become one of my favourites. My Patreon member Nat said overall they thought that Crystal was a bit robbed this week and that she deserved the win because she choreographed it and did the tumbleweed moment, and also her outfit was the best. And overall, I do agree with this point in the sense that I do think Crystal did really well, and I can see why perhaps she should have been the winner this week if we take runway into account, because I do think Anya had the best performance, but I think Crystal had the best runway, so it comes down to which one is more important. I also did really like Anya's runway though, so to me it maybe did justify her winning. And my Patreon member Gardy said, Crystal had the best runway in my opinion, but Anya slayed the maxi challenge. Tough call, but I'm happy Anya won. Still can't believe Joella turned her back to the judges during the lip sync. That do take nerve. And I totally agree with that last part. It really does take nerve to do what Joella did. That outfit was just so unintentionally funny. So I do think Joella was a very funny contestant. I really liked her on the show. I thought she brought the drama and was very intriguing. And it does take nerve to wear that sort of outfit on the runway. She did say that there was supposed to be a reveal that didn't happen, but overall, yeah, it was not the best move to turn around and not do anything with it, so it was just a little bit odd. But hey, we're still talking about it, so maybe that was the point. Then, moving on to the comments from the Have Your Say poll, there were quite a few comments from people saying they've been waiting a long time for this type of challenge, which is sort of a repeat of what they did in season 5 with the lip sync to the Untucked tracks, because there's just so much material to talk about. There's been so many fights over the years that have been so iconic. So I do think maybe this should become one of the standard challenges on Drag Race because it is just always funny. Someone else said, I think Anya may be the one to watch. The girl has talent. That performance was phenomenal. And I do agree. I think Anya really has shown the last couple of weeks that she is going to be a real contender. I think up until now, people hadn't necessarily given her that much credit, but I think she's really shown that she's got so much charisma, so much talent, and RuPaul clearly loves her because she's just got such a cool energy about her and just so captivating. And RuPaul always loves it when she's on the runway because she kind of just takes her time and all of that. And I can see why, because she is just such an interesting queen. And I think she is one to watch. There were also quite a few comments saying they thought Crystal was robbed this week. As I mentioned earlier, I do think she did well, but I do think Anya maybe just pipped her to the win because I think her performance was better and her runway was still really good. There were also a lot of comments about the comment Michelle made about Arietti's makeup, because obviously Arietti has a very signature style with the white nose, and people were saying they thought that Michelle was being rude or unnecessary in telling her to change it, because the point that most people were making is that Michelle does this all the time to queens who have a very unusual style of makeup, but she doesn't say that to queens who do traditional styles of makeup and to switch it up, so it's unfair that she only targets queens who have more unique styles. I do think perhaps Michelle could have worded it a bit different. Obviously, I do think it's probably just something for reality TV. There's always got to be a judge who's going to say something that's going to ruffle some feathers. And I can see the point that maybe you should switch it up on Drag Race if you have a signature style that's a bit more unusual or noticeable, because we know that's what the judges are going to say. But at the same time, I can also see that people are making a good point that Michelle or the judges only ever really say this to queens with a very unique style. They don't say it to queens who look more traditional. So I do agree, if you're going to say it to one queen, you kind of need to say it to everyone. But one thing I thought was interesting is that this whole issue of Michelle giving this critique to Arietti got a lot of traction on social media, and someone tweeted about it, which got a huge amount of attention. And someone replied to this saying, honestly, has this advice ever helped a drag queen on or after Drag Race? And Dawn from season 16 answered this and said, Michelle telling me to switch up my mug actually pushed me towards trying something new, which has led to different mugs that I play with now, as well as refining the signature that I was doing before, so I found it to be extremely helpful both on the show and after. However, Dawn also followed this up by saying, that being said, I've always maintained that critiques like this are good only if they're directed at all types of drag, not just telling the unique queens to be boring, like let's tell the boring girls to be unique sometimes. And I just thought this was an interesting tweet because it's a perspective from a queen who's been on the show like Dawn, who does have a signature style. So I just thought this was a very interesting first-hand experience with it. But let me know in the comments what you think about this whole makeup style and should the queen switch it up. Okay, so moving on to a little bit of drama that happened this week, and first we're going to talk about the backlash to Joella's exit line. So for those of you who have watched my Roscoe's for this week, you may have seen that at Roscoe's they talked about Joella's exit line when she said, at least I didn't die a local girl. And some people got that this was a reference to season 15 with Selena S17 during the acting challenge when she said, I died a local girl. However, at Roscoe's, Naysha Lopez had some thoughts about this and said,
girl, stop. It just shows how unaware and not in tune with our community that you are. Joella, I love you, but I hate that you said that. It was the dumbest thing to come out of your mouth, and you've said some stupid shit.
Yeah.
And someone posted this clip from Roscoe's on Twitter, and it got a huge amount of attention. And although Joella did respond previously saying that it was indeed a reference to Selena S17, it looks like Joella has now responded again specifically to Naysha's comments. So underneath the clip of this video on Twitter, Joella responded saying, I have been that local girl working for free multiple times a day and a week. Please stop trying to diminish my story and who I am. This is clearly a reference to Selena S17. You're preaching to the wrong choir, sister. There's other Ru girls and fans who need to hear that speech. And Joella followed this up even further by saying, no, what's upsetting is that it's clearly a Selena reference, and I have been that local girl working for $50 to $75 and sometimes for free multiple times a day. Just because I'm on TV doesn't erase what I've been through, and I've been the local girl that shows Naysha is in too. Anyway, ... And Joella made a few other comments and said, and if it's one thing I do is support drag, period. I go out to shows all the time. I keep up with my community. To the people barking at me, especially those who can't even name 10 drag artists who aren't on Drag Race, please shut the F up. And the tea is, in that moment, my dreams turned into my worst nightmare, and my world was for real shattering. The one good thing I thought at that moment I got out of RuPaul's Drag Race was that I got on RuPaul's Drag Race. Y'all, it was a really tough time for me, like, can I please just breathe? And so, although it looks like Joella was kind of responding to what Naysha had said at Roscoe's, she was also clarifying that it was a Selena S17 reference, but was also kind of responding to the backlash that she's got in general. And as I say in all of my videos, please make sure you don't send the queens hate. It is just a TV show at the end of the day, and you can have your opinions, but to tag the queens and say all of these horrible, nasty things to them is really not okay. So please just make sure you keep it nice and respectful, please. Okay, so finally we're going to move on to a little bit of random drama to do with an apparent editing mistake that Drag Race made, and they're now trying to cover it up. So, as many of you may know, the official RuPaul's Drag Race YouTube channel puts out previews of the upcoming episode, which are usually about 10 minutes long. However, in the preview for this upcoming episode for this week, it looks like someone spotted an editing mistake and Drag Race are now trying to cover it up, potentially. And I'll put links to all of the Reddit threads that I found this on in the video description if you want to go and check it out. So, someone on Reddit noticed that in the preview for this week, in the part where the queens were picking their roles, there was a point where you could see that they were sitting on the sofa and Anya was saying who wants this role and no one said anything, so they said, oh, crickets, because no one wanted it. but you can see a small white triangle appear, and people think that Anya was actually flipping the paper at the time, but they've taken the footage from when Anya was looking up to try and make it look more tense and make it look like people weren't looking at her to make it seem more shady. But actually they think they've taken two different bits and spliced them together, and this white triangle in the middle is the bit of the folding paper, which gives away that they've taken it from two different places. I'll play the footage now because it maybe makes a bit more sense when you actually see it. But focus on the small white triangle.
Yeah, that's my number one.
Anyone fighting for it?
I don't hear nothing but crickets. Nobody in the room wants the role.
So I think what people are trying to say is that when Anya said, "Does anyone want this role?" they tried to make it look like no one was looking at Anya to make it seem a kind of shady. But this white triangle, people think, means that they took a part where everyone was just looking at their papers, so everyone was looking down, and they've taken that footage where everyone's looking down, and then they've superimposed it over the top of the bit where Anya looks up and says, "Does anyone want this role?" to try and make it look more tense than it actually was in reality, because these moments happened at different times. Now, this is a very, very small editing mistake. I personally would never have noticed this, but someone on Reddit clearly did. However, on a different Reddit thread, someone has said that the first look preview video has now been set to private and is no longer available. And I have checked and this is true. I cannot see this preview anywhere on the RuPaul's Drag Race YouTube channel, and it has been taken down. And if you try and click on the link, it actually says that it's a private video. And people are now assuming that Drag Race must have found out that someone noticed this editing mistake and was posting about it on Reddit. So Drag Race has now taken down the preview to try and cover up the fact that this editing mistake got exposed. Now, obviously, this is just a complete guess and is supposition. This is not confirmed, but it does seem quite coincidental that this made a big splash on Reddit and then now this video has been privated. But I just thought this was interesting because we know that there are definitely editing mistakes on Drag Race. I've talked about it on my channel. There are other channels that have talked about it as well. But the fact that Drag Race potentially, allegedly, has maybe tried to cover it up, I just think is kind of interesting. But let me know in the comments what you think. Do you accept that Drag Race and other reality shows are heavily edited? Or do you think that this kind of editing where they try and change the narrative is taking it too far? And it'll be interesting to see when this episode does come out in full, whether they've now corrected this editing mistake or whether it will still be in there. So keep an eagle eye out for that when the full episode does come out. So there you go, there was the Have Your Say video for RuPaul's Drag Race Season 17, Episode 4. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this week's challenge. And do you think that this type of challenge should be a regular challenge that happens every season on Drag Race? If you'd like to get exclusive benefits such as early access to my videos and having your comment featured in my Have Your Say videos as well as many other benefits, please consider signing up to my Patreon. It just costs a few dollars a month. It really supports my channel and is such a huge lifeline to me and my channel. So please consider, and I'll put a link in the description. And I would just like to say thank you so much to my Patreon members. Your support is truly incredible. I am so humbled and so appreciative of all of your support. I really love seeing you have your say comments. I really love this community that I've built on Patreon. So thank you all so much for supporting me. It really does mean more than you know. If you liked this video, please make sure you like and comment on the video because it really helps boost the algorithm and tell YouTube to promote this to other people. And please make sure you subscribe because it really makes a huge difference to my channel. So hit that subscribe button now. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you'll join me again for some future videos. Thank you, bye!